Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I am doing a voiceover for an entire approach into Dabo Singkep, which is ICAO code Whiskey India Delta Sierra. So at this point in time we're probably about 5,000 feet or so. We're doing a visual approach as opposed to an instrument approach, and I'll put on the screen what that means later, but essentially we're under full visual flight rules at this point, so I'm just going to visually navigate around the clouds to stay visual with terrain. And I am pilot flying for this flight, so everything you see is me on the right hand side, including the controls. I hope it's interesting enough. I've got the whole 15 minutes worth of the approach, so I just thought that would be a little bit more interesting for those who want to see the entire process from start to finish, as opposed to a time lapse which I have in my other vlogs. Please let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, and any constructive criticism is also welcome, because I want to dial in what you guys like to watch. So here's the information. Aerodrome Dabo Singkep, runway length is 1,400 meters by 30 meters, and runways 14 and 32. So in this video we are coming into runway 14. It was most efficient to come straight in as opposed to recircuit for the other opposite end of the runway. So, like I mentioned before, this is a visual approach. We are under VFR rules, and our aircraft is fully equipped for IFR if we need to, but the weather is perfect today, so there's really no need other than for training purposes. For those who aren't familiar, VFR essentially just means you are navigating visually, your own eyes, using maps, charts, whatever you need. In this case, we generally just use the GPS to give us our rough location, but we're pretty familiar with the area that we're flying to, but we stay visual with the terrain or the horizon at all times. So for instrument flight rules, if we had to do an instrument approach, the way we navigate is that there are instruments on our display that will essentially guide us into the airport that we're flying to. And so we can actually be completely blind, see nothing on the outside up until a few hundred feet off the ground, and then we can continue to land once we are visual with the runway. So the way we derive the information on our instruments is that we pick up signals from a ground-based navigational aid that will send out information to the aircraft about where our location is relative to the airport. Or you can also use GPS if there is a proper GPS approach for that airport. So around this time we have our approach checklist, so that is fuel tanks both on towards normal, lights on, and brakes checked. So that's not exactly how we say it, because there's different call outs for the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring, and also the first officer side is different to the captain side in terms of switches. So as is mentioned on the screen, checklists are used to ensure flight tasks are completed with the pilot monitoring and reading items allowed, and the pilot flying confirming them by replying with a response. For example, flaps, and then the pilot flying replies with full. Checklists just bring a whole lot of standardization and redundancy into the cockpit, So if you didn't have checklists, there's no real way other than just your memory to know whether or not you've already verified that you've done all of the pre-landing or pre-flight checks in a particular order. And because you have two pilots in the cockpit, if one of you make a mistake, then it is highly likely the other pilot will pick it up. So again, it just comes back to redundancy and standardization. That is why we do our checklists. Right, so here we're about 5 miles out from the airport, so I'll put my power lever to 500 foot-pounds and the propeller pitch all the way forward. That way we can slow ourselves down from the previously about 170 knots down to below 135 knots, which means I can start to put down our flap. So once we get below 135 knots of indicated airspeed, I will request flaps 10 from the pilot monitoring, or my captain on the left, and he will verify that the speed is below 135, and once he's done that, he'll put the flaps to 10. After that, we'll slow down dramatically as well, because now we've got more drag from the flaps. So after we've gone below 125 knots, I'll request for flaps 20, and then below 100 knots, I will request for flaps full, but it's all at my discretion. So depending on our current descent profile, kind of our altitude, compared to the airport distance, I'll request flaps at a different time to usual, but in this case we're perfectly on profile, so I kind of just ask as soon as that speed drops. Okay, so now we are at short finals or so I request the finals checklist from the captain, which is flaps full, prop max, inertial separator bypass, ignition on, yaw damper off, and then he'll give me a speed, ground speed, and wind speed call out. All of that information is just useful to me, and I can keep my eyes mostly outside of the cockpit to make sure our profile remains all a-okay for the landing. At this point, I only need a few little movements in the power lever to adjust the speed. I'm mostly just keeping it around 450 foot-pounds. Once we round out and come to the runway, I will pitch the nose upwards to flare and then put the power lever to idle. Pretty solid landing there, about a 7 out of 10 in my books. Kept centerline well and didn't use up very much runway, so that's pretty decent overall. Here I use a bit of beta and reverse thrust to assist me in slowing down and turning, and then I'll backtrack down the runway to the apron via taxiway Alpha. There's only 2 here as it's a very, very tiny airport. And then I will slow the aircraft down, bring it to a stop in front of the marshaller, who will guide us into the parking stand. After that, we'll shut down the aircraft, do our post-flight inspection of the aircraft, and then we'll be happy days and back home. Thank you guys again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments if you prefer a video with or without commentary, and what other videos you might like to see in the future. I have a couple of vlogs on the way, but those will take a little bit of time for me to work on.
Apa nih, Bu?